available. Thank you. So again, welcome everyone. We have one attendee joining in this break. I don't know who that is, but you're welcome to stay. We have Paul Murray from Nutanix joining us, and I hope everyone heard about Nutanix. If not, then Paul will have a lot of information for you to share with. So Paul, the stage is yours. And in the meantime, I'm trying to figure out where my polls went.
Okay, so first of all, it's a long time since I've done a user group. I think the last one was actually in Denmark in Denmark when we're still allowed to travel. That thing about getting on aeroplanes and flying places. That doesn't sort of exist anymore. So as always, thanks for the invite. Thanks for the chance to talk about this Citrix stuff on top of Nutanix. So just a couple of words about me and the slide you see on the screen. So it's the 72 slides in there. I'm not going to present all of them. I think 30 or 40 of them are reference cases or customer success stories and that sort of thing. I always put it in slide decks because those questions often come up about, does anybody actually use this stuff? So like that's proof that Citrix is deployed on Nutanix a lot. So a little bit about me. So I've been at Nutanix 4.5, almost 5 years now. The role is solutions architect in Northern Europe. So Northern Europe is essentially Benelux, so Belgium, Holland, those countries, Scandinavia, Eastern Europe, so stretching all the way across the, I always call it the cold countries in Northern Europe, but that's not true. I know that Romania is definitely not cold in summer. So like I said, it stretches to all of those countries, so a fairly large area. Before that, I worked at Citrix for, I think, 17 years doing in those days, it was Zen Desktop Technical Readiness. I think the last time I went to Romania was probably 20 years ago, so a long time ago. So once coronavirus is gone, I hope to get back. So Victor asked the question, or posed the question about who knows Nutanix. And I know it's always difficult. If you start asking questions on the webinar, it sort of breaks up the flow. But my assumption is some of the guys or some of the attendees know what Nutanix is. Some of those guys don't know what Nutanix is, may have heard about it on the website and stuff like that. I tried to get a couple of polls together. I'll be honest, Victor, I forgot about that to send it to you last night. The slide deck I can send as well. I post that onto the Slack channel. So for those of you that don't know what Nutanix is, it's all about hyperconvergence. So it's one of these marketing terms that has been popping up in the industry or on web pages or whatever the last few years. So a lot of software vendors profess to being able to do hyperconvergence. Now, if you've been in the industry a long time, you've heard about convergence, integrated systems, all that sort of stuff. So the way I talk about hyperconvergence, let's go through this in just 2 or 3 minutes, is to try and differentiate ourselves to what I see as competitive technologies. So competition themselves, I'll be blunt, so VMware with vSAN, Microsoft to a certain extent with Storage Spaces Direct, but also traditional 3-tier architecture. So I always make this comparison about a traditional data center where, oh, there's a pop-up there. Have you ever used Nutanix?
Have you?
Oh, yes, because it'd be bad if I hadn't done. So, yeah, I've used Nutanix a little bit. I'll tell you why I went to Nutanix. Is one of the reasons for actually going is because of the story of Citrix. But like I said, I tried to make this comparison between a traditional data center and what Nutanix is all about. So if you look at a data center, you've always got some sort of application layer. It could be your SQL servers, your Exchange servers, or when you're talking about Citrix technologies, the virtual apps and desktops. Below that, there's a virtualization layer, typically, I mean, not always. That could be the Citrix hypervisor, ESX, Hyper-V, or when you look at pure Nutanix, an AHV or a KVM-based hypervisor. And then below that, critical to applications, critical to workloads, is some sort of infrastructure consisting of scale-out servers, storage networks, storage controllers, so fiber channel stuff, storage media, whatever. Now, what Nutanix actually does when we talk about the enterprise cloud data center, to use a correct marketing term, is we converge this layer. So those layers in gray, the virtualization layer, the scale-out servers, the server infrastructure, storage, networks, and whatever, and converge that into some sort of appliance form factor. Other vendors do that as well. vSAN does that, Dell EMC does that, VxRail does that. They all converge as existing technology and present it in some sort of form factor within the data center. So at this point, we're no different to any other of these vendors. So this is why I don't like talking about the marketing concept of hyperconvergence, because to me, as an employee or as someone that actually likes this technology, again, it was one of the reasons I went to Nutanix, is it's very interesting technology. We do it differently. But the way we do that differently is on top of this converged infrastructure, there's an operating system that is running. That contains, when you do pure Nutanix or everything Nutanix, it contains the virtualization layer as well. But like I said, it's a software stack or an operating system running on top of that appliance that brings an incredible amount of intelligence into that solution. So that's why I will talk about, when we say what is hyperconvergence, it's this converged infrastructure plus that operating system on top that allows you to do things such as virtualization in the way that those applications or those workloads require that virtualization to be done. In terms of the applications themselves, we don't need to change anything in the application. So Citrix virtual apps and desktops, we're talking about today, there's no changes to that application layer. So everything that you've learned over those years about virtual apps and desktops or Zen Desktop, Zen App applies to this new hyperconvergence world. So that's the marketing story: converged infrastructure, an operating system on top that allows you to run your workloads. In this case, virtual apps and desktops. When we look at the architecture, this is where I make the distinction between traditional three-tier architecture and the Nutanix architecture. So in a three-tier world or in a traditional world, you've typically got some sort of server infrastructure. So in this case, node 1, node 2, node 3, there's a hypervisor in there, there is storage in there, and they're running all workloads. You need to manage that as some sort of entity. Now, the System Center Virtual Machine Manager, or the Hyper-V Manager, or vCenter, or whatever, they are consoles, or Zen Center in the Citrix world, they are consoles that will allow you to manage those individual servers in some sort of farm construct or some sort of cluster construct. So allow you to do management activities on these individual machines as a complete entity. It worked. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but there's additional functionality, there's additional things that you have to take into consideration to ensure that those servers, that those nodes are running effectively. When we talk about Nutanix, there's a few pieces that I want to explain. There's a few general architectural changes that I want to explain. So first of all, there is a thing called a CVM, so Controller Virtual Machine. Now, for those of you that may have worked with vSAN, they will talk about hyperconverged infrastructure, and their storage technology as such is part of their hypervisor. In our world, in the Nutanix world, this storage controller is part of a thing called a controller virtual machine. So it's a user virtual machine that sits on top of the hypervisor. That allows us to be able to run on ESX, Zen server, we don't support that anymore. There's a few limited use cases, Hyper-V or AHV. So AHV is our hypervisor, it's a KVM derivative, but it brings us hypervisor agnosticity. So we can run essentially on any type of hypervisor. There's no tie-ins to that underlying infrastructure. What the CVM does at a very high level is it will interact or interrupt between the virtual machine, the hypervisor, and the storage. What it also does, which is extremely important to our architecture, is first of all, the CVMs are run on their own private network. They communicate with each other. They've got knowledge about what other VMs are running in that cluster, what the other controller virtual machines are doing, the configuration of those nodes, etc. But one essential piece is they build a single storage fabric. So each virtual machine or each node or each hypervisor believes that it can store data anywhere in this cluster. How we use that, I'll go into that in a few minutes. But what we effectively do, or what we actually do in the background, is when this CVM or when this virtual machine, so take the third one on node 1, when that wants to write data, it will talk to the CVM. The CVM will say, okay, for performance reasons, I'm going to write that data, but I'll write it on the locally attached drives on this node. To be able to do that, it's different to three-tier architecture. We've got no concept of a RAID controller. So everything that you know of about RAID technologies, we do that in software with this controller virtual machine. We don't use RAID, but I use the word RAID to get across that sort of concept. So we write data locally. And what we also do is we create a replica, so a protection of that data, and replicate that somewhere else in the cluster. So there's a few things that brings in. It brings up scalability. So like I said, we always write locally. We will always create a replica and store that somewhere else in the cluster. That brings on a concept of linear scalability. Tying that into the Citrix world, I'll come back to that in a few minutes. It's an extremely critical aspect. But the CVM, like I said, sits between the virtual machines, the hypervisor, and reads and writes storage locally to ensure the performance. This whole construct, this single storage fabric, is presented back to the hypervisor as a single block. So when it comes to managing your storage, managing your VM storage as such, you're talking as an admin, you're talking to a single mount point, if you want, but this storage fabric spreads across all of those nodes. If you want to extend that, it's as simple as adding in additional hardware and expanding that cluster. In a Nutanix world, that takes until this virtual machine, or until this hypervisor is ready, so assuming you've racked it and stacked it, that actual expansion process takes 2 or 3 minutes. 2 or 3 minutes later, this additional resource is ready for consumption from those virtual machines. So linear scalability is one of these givens in a Nutanix world. Stuff such as data locality, so the bottom part, deduplication, snapshots, storage compression, whatever, that's done through the controller virtual machine. So again, separating that function away from the hypervisor to allow a couple of things. The hypervisor does what it should do. It virtualizes an environment to be able to run your workloads. The controller virtual machine, or the Nutanix software, is essential or controls the complete storage story in that architecture. So how does this apply to Citrix? So again, I know, so talking to Victor yesterday through email, I know that a few of you guys have done deployments for multiple thousand desktops. So this whole Citrix story shouldn't be anything new. Consists of a lot of things: delivery protocol, remote access, the actual application and desktop delivery, virtualization, server infrastructure, storage, data protection, networking security. Those are the typical building blocks that you'll be confronted with to build an EUC or a virtual apps and desktop environment. It works, we know it works, we've been doing it for many, many years, but potentially there's a lot of different vendors involved in that equation. That can lead into complexity. It makes it more difficult to get it to knit together, to work together. It can be more difficult, more expensive to scale that. There's inconsistent performance. It's not end user focused. So again, without the Nutanix architecture, one thing that you'll often see, and it's also one of the reasons why a lot of EUC or VDI projects fail, is when you do that POC, it looks fantastic, it works okay, your users connecting to a couple of desktops, a few applications, and it looks good. You then try to scale that out, and it becomes more and more complex. You then need to go from a few hundred users to a few thousand users. You cannot guarantee that you're going to have a consistent performance for all of those users or all of those new users as they start to use this infrastructure. So why we say Nutanix and Citrix is better or better together is because of two reasons. First of all, Citrix does this top piece. So the delivery protocol, HDX, we all know, secure remote access, so secure gateways, so NetScalers or SD-WANs, whatever they're called nowadays, the desktop delivery, application delivery, profile management. So Kasper talked about that with the Windows Environment Manager stuff and Citrix layering, whatever. That's what Citrix does. They understand this. What we understand, so without trying to be too arrogant, but what we understand is the bottom part of that stack. So virtualization, the server storage infrastructure. So this, again, consolidating or converging that infrastructure, and then adding components on top. So data protection, networking security, a few things that are required in an environment for a successful EUC deployment. So both are market leaders in their respective areas. So EUC is Citrix, obviously, and HCI or Hyperconverged Infrastructure is us. We've also worked with Citrix engineering. So like I said, I used to work there. I know the development or the co-development that was done between the two companies. This pay-as-you-grow is also extremely important. It ties into linear scalability. We can scale this infrastructure as is required. So I don't like talking about it anymore because we've been doing it for 9 months, but this whole COVID or coronavirus stuff, a lot of people have been confronted with having to work from home. A lot of IT people have been confronted with having to spin up an infrastructure extremely quickly. So they have requirements to add in resources at a very quick, in a very quick fashion. This Nutanix architecture allows us to do that. Results in better user experience, hybrid cloud, and essentially this platform is ready to go in hours and not weeks compared to a traditional 3-tier architecture. Another way of saying that is expanding it as is required. I know it's a PowerPoint presentation, PowerPoint animation, but to be able to expand the cluster is essentially add in that additional hardware, expand that cluster. Once that has taken place, it takes a few minutes, like I said in the software, this environment is ready for additional users. So expand as is required. So that was the sort of marketing positioning story, what Nutanix is all about, why we work with Citrix. So why do we make it better? And again, I know it's a blunt statement, but I worked at Citrix. I know how the architecture worked. I know some of the limitations. So one question I was always confronted with is, if you were to run a POC, you'd typically have a Zen server back in those days with locally attached storage. You'd spin up a few applications, a few desktops, works perfectly okay. You then need to get to the point where you need to expand that to multiple servers. Back then, you typically talk about 3-tier architecture or some sort of network-based storage, so SAN storage or whatever. It works. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but that brings in a set of limitations. So if we go back a few slides to this one, let me do it this way. As I sort of just described, what we do is we create this single storage fabric. And if you look at what we're actually doing in reality is we are presenting local storage, so the locally attached drives or storage media on this machine back to that virtual machine. So the virtual machine itself believes that it's running on local storage. And you can discuss this as much as you want. You are not going to get faster than local storage. The analogy that I make there is take a Windows machine or an OS, a MacBook or whatever. It's got locally installed SSDs. You can also attach a USB drive to it. You can install your applications on the local drives. You can also install your applications on the locally attached USB disk. Both are going to work. Which one do you want to use on a daily basis? The USB drive or your locally installed SSD drives? If you say the USB drive, then you may need to rethink about how you're using machines. So locally attached storage is always going to be faster. We talk about simplicity, data locality. I can look at this. Those pieces enable stuff such as linear scalability. So the ability to be able to add in hardware as is required, as your resources dictate. Because we control the storage plane, I mean, there's the product marketing guys, they don't like SEs talking about us being a storage company, but essentially that is the piece of the equation that we've changed. But because we control this storage layer, why not offer that out to additional resources in the network? So block storage, NAS storage, so file services, your CIFS shares in your Windows environment, the storage for your application layers, if you're using application layering, the storage for your FS Logix environment. So we control that complete storage plane. So why shouldn't we use that as well and offer that out as a service to all these different types of consumers? So files, block storage, S3 object storage, or whatever. Once that's been done, another important part is I need to be able to replicate that very simply to other locations. I need to be able to protect that with disaster recovery. So all these things are built into the Nutanix solution. There's no need for additional components to do disaster recovery or whatever. It's part of the concept. If I get a couple of minutes, I'll show you that in the console. Another thing, again, tying into the Citrix world, where we start to look at the performance, where we start to look at how we do it differently compared to 3-tier storage or SAN storage. There's this thing that we call shadow clones. Essentially what it is caching of your vDisks and VM data. So again, look at or think about the environment where you have multiple nodes. So this one, we just move that picture. We have multiple nodes, for example. Now, as you know, in the Citrix world, using machine creation services, you create a base virtual machine. Without Nutanix, the way it's going to work is your virtual machines on node 1 are going to boot up. They're going to talk to the base virtual machine. They'll create their difference disk, their ID disk, whatever, and they will read storage locally. In a SAN world, if you want to scale out, so I know 100 users, 200, 300 users, you're going to have virtual machines on a hypervisor that is remote to that base virtual machine. If you're using some sort of local storage or SAN storage, these machines will still boot up. They're going to talk to the hypervisor. Without Nutanix, that's going to have to go to across the network, possibly get that content that it requires, bring it back to the local hypervisor, process that, and that virtual machine will continue to work. On a 3rd node, 4th node, 5th node, it does the same. So you get a lot of network traffic. Now, I know PBS and MCS, they have acceleration technologies that need to be built in. You need to configure that, stuff like that. It works, but this is part of the Nutanix cluster concept or Nutanix architecture. It's what we do. So in the Nutanix world, what happens is the base virtual machine is created, the VMs will start, they'll go through the controller virtual machine, it will say, right, here's your storage, go and get those blocks, it will start those virtual machines. On a remote node, the first instance of that boot, or the first instance of accessing that data, it's going to go across the network, it doesn't know where that data is, so it has to go to the base virtual machine. It will then read it across the network, and what shadow clones will do is say, okay, instead of each virtual machine having to go across the network each time, why don't I create a copy locally? So essentially, over time, in a Nutanix world, you have a copy of the base image on each node. So we don't copy the whole base virtual machine, we copy what is required at that point in time to be able to run that virtual machine. So again, we always get back to this concept of data locality. And the very simple way of saying it is, in a Nutanix world, your virtual machines will always be using local disks. That's the reality of the whole situation. So all this SAN storage, SAN networks, virtual LANs and all that sort of stuff basically disappears in a Nutanix world. That's why it's important for VDI, because we're reading local data, which also means we can ensure this linear scalability. As you need to expand out from a couple of nodes or a few hundred virtual machines to hundreds, multiple thousands of virtual machines. You essentially drop in additional hardware. Go back a screen. This concept of reading locally is always going to take place. Compared to other technologies, they will say they have data locality. What they do in reality is they will take two storage pools in their concept and balance across those storage pools. It works, but as you scale out, you're building in an imbalance into that architecture. You could have the situation with a 4-node cluster in vSAN where 2 nodes are doing 80% of the work and 2 nodes are doing 20% of the work. It works, but it's not as resilient or linearly scalable. Now I'm running out of time, I guess. vGPUs. So obviously we support vGPU. So it's a KVM derivative. So everything you can do in the Citrix hypervisor world with vGPU, GPU pass-through, that sort of stuff is part of our solution as well. And the big benefit here is we can mix and match hardware. You don't have to have the same hardware in that cluster. So again, as time goes on, you add in the resources that you need to be able to perform that activity. The storage, we talked about this earlier. So we create that single storage fabric. So why not do things such as files for your EUC users? So profile or storage for your profiles, storage for your FS logics, app layering, stuff like that. So again, Nutanix files is built into the architecture. There's no additional pieces that need to be installed. You need to configure it, but there's no additional pieces that actually need to be installed on top of that cluster. It's integrated into the solution. So an example where we can use that is user profiles, home directories, departmental shares. That's going to get us the ability to be able to, I'll say it bluntly, remove your NetApp stuff. And essentially what you're doing is you have a Nutanix cluster, you're managing that storage for your VDI world, you're managing that storage for your Windows file shares, NF file shares, or whatever. A couple of use cases. So we talked about these, app layering, app V, FS logics, whatever. I can send a slide deck. I know I'm going through it fast. One question that often comes up is, can I use PVS on this? So again, not going through the PVS Citrix, the PVS MCS discussion. That's a completely different discussion. But PVS, like you know, it's a network streaming protocol. Machine creation services is typically a storage-oriented protocol. So a lot of people incorrectly assume that I can't use PVS in a Nutanix world. First of all, yes, you can. We don't optimize PVS like we do with MCS, but PVS still needs to store data. Your virtual disk store, your disaster recovery, high availability of your disk stores. Again, that applies into the Nutanix concept. So everything that we do in terms of disaster recovery can apply to your PVS world. So it makes PVS or managing the PVS simpler on a Nutanix architecture compared to 3-tier architecture. A couple of new pieces. So microsegmentation. So the ability to be able to say that this group of virtual machines can talk across this set of protocols to that set of backend infrastructure, or these VMs can talk through this protocol to those applications. Now, microsegmentation isn't anything new. NSX, Cisco ACI, they've had that concept for many, many years. What we do differently is we define, for example, which set of which set of desktop pools or which set of virtual machines can talk to which application. And it's all based on policies. So you create your policy saying this application communication is allowable. Think of it another way, creating your firewall rules if you want, and then applying that firewall rule to a set of applications or a set of desktops. The big benefit here is if you start to move virtual machines from group to group, these policies are automatically applied. So it's important in this cloud world where you're not sure where your virtual machines are running. It could be running on any machine in your infrastructure. So that's what the whole concept around Nutanix Flow is around. So, like I said, applying security policies that block or allow certain communication within your network infrastructure. And then I guess the last one I want to talk about, maybe I can show you the console quickly, is disaster recovery. So when it comes to...
Just 1 second, you can go over the time. We can use the time for the break or shorten the break, it's fine.
All right, I'll show you 5 minutes to console. So disaster recovery is, again, I know we talk about simplicity. It's very simple in the Nutanix world. So I don't have a storage background. When I first started working here, all this storage, so I know what NFS is, I know what iSCSI is, that sort of stuff. But I'd never set up a NetApp environment. I didn't know all the complexities of metro replication, synchronous replication, async replication, all that sort of stuff was completely foreign to me. So I had to learn all this to be able to talk about it sort of intelligently to customers. But what I've seen over the past few years is disaster recovery in the Nutanix world is extremely simple. I've tried to boil it down to three points. So it's defining what you want to protect. So that is essentially your protection domain. So the set of virtual machines that need to be protected. So let's take 2 examples. I want to protect my virtual desktops, or I want to be able to replicate my master images. So stay with that thought for a minute. The second part is then, when do I want to replicate it? So creating a schedule. Do I do it once a day? Or if it's important data, maybe every hour? If it's not such important data, maybe once a week. So define my schedule about when to do it. And then I need to define where I want to replicate to, or where I want to protect that information to. I can protect it to the same cluster. It doesn't really make sense. That'd be a snapshot sort of thing. I could protect it to a second physical Nutanix cluster in the same data center or in a remote data center. I can also protect it to a cloud-based environment, so AWS or Azure. So using that as a backup or a snapshot replication point. So essentially I create 3 things, like I said: what I want to protect, when I want to protect that, and where I want to protect that to. So as an example, where we can use this is, let me try and get the right slide. Not on this one. So go back to this one. If I want to protect, for example, master images, do I want to protect master images? Typically not. What I often want to do is I want to replicate those master images to another cluster or to another storage subsystem. So this inbuilt disaster recovery can be used as a technique to replicate your images or your image templates or persistent virtual machines to a different location for backup or for protection methods. An example of that in this one, so Prism Central is the management console. I can create a construct or an environment where I'm protecting everything in this primary cluster to another secondary cluster. I can also set it up that I'm creating a schedule or a protection domain that only protects a subset of that information and protects it somewhere else. So to cluster 3. And I could also have cluster 3 replicating that complete one to cluster 2. So I can build extremely complex data protection environments. It's all done through the Prism Central Prism console. I can tie in things such as boot order dependencies. I can tie in runbooks. So if something happens, it initiates an automatic failover, initiates an automatic startup process, and whatever. So again, this whole disaster recovery stuff, if you look at the feature list on the web page, it's a tick box. We do disaster recovery, but it's part of the solution. It's very, very powerful. It's, without going through all the details, we talk about RPO and RTO. We can do async protection, synchronous protection. There's a thing called near sync. metro replication, all that sort of functionality. But again, built into the actual product. And then the last two for here would be connecting that to the cloud. So a lot of customers are talking about a cloud-first strategy. If you look at what Citrix is doing now with their Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop service, they're trying to get a lot of customers to go cloud-first. People don't want that, or people don't want only that. They want the choice. Run some workloads on-prem, run some workloads in the cloud. So this is a very old screenshot. It's probably 2 or 3 years old now. The concept is still the same. So if you go back sort of 2 or 3 years with Citrix, they started to talk about, no, even further than that, there was the HP pods and stuff like that, and then connecting to cloud and whatever. So that over the years has basically turned into virtual apps and desktop service. So what we enable is a customer can use this CVAD service. So the complete management stuff from the Citrix viewpoint is done in the cloud on Citrix Cloud. The customer still wants their workloads to run on-prem. So we build a Nutanix cluster on-prem, and through this Citrix Cloud Connect, basically connect these two worlds together. So that allows us to do things such as everything public if you want, everything private if you want, but if you're joining these two worlds together, this sort of hybrid cloud, multi-cloud story. We've extended that a step further. There's a new product called Nutanix Clusters, allows you to build cluster environments on Azure, AWS, in the future Google Cloud. So bigger companies, typically they've got workloads that could run on Google Cloud Platform. They have other workloads that run on AWS, maybe some on Azure. So we need to be able to bring all those together. That's what Nutanix Clusters is all about. So in that sense, to us, the virtual apps and desktop is just a workload that runs on our clustering technology. Where it runs, whether it's private, public, or between, doesn't really matter. So as a summary, 2 things to get across. So EUC is something that we've been doing for more than 10 years now. It's why Nutanix started, to be honest. So like I said, without going through the whole history, we changed the way storage works. EUC or VDI or Citrix is one of our most successful workloads. I think first year we had 80% of our revenue was based on, or was because of a Citrix workload running on Nutanix. It's something that a lot of customers do. So I don't have the exact numbers. I mean, this is a PowerPoint slide, thousands of customers. The last numbers that I saw was, so we've got an insights thing similar to most vendors, was something like 130,000 nodes worldwide. And if you look at the numbers or averages of users connected to a node, you're talking about 4 or 5 million users just running, or concurrent users running on a Nutanix architecture. So it's not a new concept. It's not an unproven technology. It's something that many customers have been doing for many, many years. So the rest of the slide, I won't go through those. I can send that out. Like I said, it's got case studies, other stuff about the architecture. So I can send that to you, Victor. I'll send it in Slack or whatever. But that was essentially what Nutanix is all about. So any questions?
I will launch a new question about Nutanix now, so please, everyone vote. And if there are questions, please have them addressed.
So there's only one answer. Okay, so being serious about this one. So the third question seems awesome, but not right now. When I first started at Nutanix, the first role I had was assistant engineer in southern Sweden. And that was actually what I would see a lot, was customers like the story, but they just updated their hardware. They just updated the storage. So it wasn't the right point in time. And I know I work with the vendor, it's easy for me to say that, but a lot of those customers have come back to us in those sort of 2 or 3 years, and they've started to do some sort of deployment on Nutanix. I'm not saying it's the only way to do it. I think I sort of alluded to it through the presentation, but one of the reasons I was so interested in Nutanix was this whole storage thing is just something that you can consume in a data center. Why do you need all that complexity of managing storage, managing fiber channels, iSCSI, your SAN networks, network controllers, all that sort of stuff? It should be just there that you consume from. And like I said, there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of clever stuff that has to happen to make it work. But in the VDI world, you just consume that storage. So that was what was important to me. And now I'll shut up.
Questions?
For
for everyone, I'm not sure if I've been away for a couple of moments here and there in the presentation. I'm not sure if Paul mentioned anything about their acquisition of Frame and how Frame can deliver virtual desktops and applications to browsers. Yeah. So that's one thing which can be mentioned.
So I didn't actually, Victor.
That goes a bit in conflict with. I'm not sure. I'm just saying. I'm assuming.
No, it's how you position it, how you talk about it correctly. So I think where so Nutanix made a mistake initially was we said that Frame is a competitor to Citrix. It's not. Frame, like you said, is desktops as a service. So consuming your desktops from the cloud. It works extremely well if that is your requirement to be able to access applications based in the cloud. So I won't protect Citrix here. I'll protect on-prem VDI. So what I'll say is Horizon View, I know it's a Citrix user group. So Horizon View or virtual apps and desktops are very much more mature when it's compared to Frame. So virtual apps and desktops, you've got all that flexibility of different types of clients, different user groups, profile management, application layering, or your access gateway stuff, SD-WAN stuff or whatever from a single vendor. Frame doesn't touch half of that. It's rudimentary accessing desktops from the cloud. Frame competes with virtual or Windows Virtual Desktop. It will compete with the Citrix managed desktops and the sort of Horizon View cloud technology. It shouldn't compete with virtual apps and desktops on-prem. If that makes sense.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions? One, two. I think Guy has one question. He comes next. Thank you very much for being with us, Paul. We do appreciate Nutanix sponsorship and the fact that we have you here for a while, and not just for this session, as usually sponsors come. And we do welcome you for future sessions where you could probably expand a bit more the presentation and the topic of having Citrix on top of Nutanix. And I think there's a lot to say about Nutanix. I've personally pushed a couple of times for Nutanix. The problem was budgeting, but that's another story. I like Nutanix, and I do consider a good contender for keeping the Citrix workloads on. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. I'll send the slide deck, and like I said, I'll stay here if there's questions. Happy.
Thank you very much. Now we have a very short break, so 2 minutes maybe, and then we will have Guy sharing his presentation, his session about dissecting logons. So Guy will make your logons faster. And I will start now a poll. So please vote. I will leave this for 2-3 minutes until Guy starts his session.
I do like this poll. So we have 1 more minute from the break. Do you want me to share that minute or?
That's okay.
I can calm down if you like.
That's okay. I just realized that I had a session about app layering, which is the last session for today, and I was ready to do a demo, and my whole environment doesn't work anymore. And this was the test. Last night was working. After it was broken. I don't know why. It's a lab, so they get
excuses,
broken.
Excuses.
Yeah, well, I need to have this fixed.
Do you like my t-shirt? I've specially put this t-shirt on for today.
I try not to laugh at my own jokes, but yeah, we all know that. That's why we will leave this poll running. So please vote, guys. You have 1.5 minutes. I can see the results, but I won't share them until I leave the poll open.
Well, if the results aren't
minutes.
good enough, I'm not going to present. You realise that, don't you? I'll sulk. Yeah. I'll cry.
Yeah, well,
I'm very sensitive. I'm shy and sensitive. That's me.
Let me see if I can find that. Yeah, it's not here. Or if it is, yeah, I had one of those interesting t-shirts that you have. And by the way, Guy has a lot of nice and geeky t-shirts. So if we'll meet again, and by the way, you're invited for the next sessions as well. Hopefully, when we will get rid of this COVID thing, you can fly here and maybe, or take a bus.
Well, I think this the whole COVID lockdown lack of travel is my fault, because at the new year I bought some new t-shirts like this to present in, and then I also bought a new slightly bigger suitcase for longer trips. And guess what? Haven't used the suitcase, haven't presented with the t-shirt. So it is probably all my fault, and for that I do apologize, because I really do miss the face-to-face events.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so 3 minutes. Let's share the results. So 46% undoubtedly like Guy. Yep, probably because of the t-shirts and jokes.
Well, I don't try to be a cool guy anyway, but well, if you don't know who I am, seriously, then if nothing else, follow me on Twitter. There are the occasional bad jokes, but other than that, a lot of PowerShell stuff, a lot of EUC troubleshooting tips and things like that.
Yep, and we all love you for the PowerShell tips, by the way. I'm not sure if you have a tip per day, but if you do the average, probably it's more than 1 per day.
Yes, well, I'm working on my website so that I can, because what people say is, yeah, great tips, but then I can't find them again. So I'm working on a website, where I can put all those tips, PowerShell snippets, EUC troubleshooting, all these presentations. So sort of a go-to troubleshooting site. I
would bet you have that GitHub repository.
Oh yes, yeah, we'll be using some scripts from that in the demos today, because it's not just talking. There's a lot of demos as well. So ready when you are.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to turn my camera off to save a little bit of bandwidth. Now that you all know what I look like and I've had my hair cut. Okay, so what we'll talk about today is how to analyze logons, and so some techniques for seeing what's potentially slow or going wrong during logon. Let me just start my timer. Good, and we'll come back to that later. So yeah, my background, I've been 25 years in this EUC space now, so I've been working with Citrix since '95. A lot of troubleshooting. My background actually is as a developer, so I think that gives me a different mindset potentially for troubleshooting problems. So I'm going to share some of the the tools and techniques that I've been using for many years to try and understand logons, because that's always an area that people want to either improve speed or wonder why something's going wrong, or wonder why different users get different experiences on different days. And anyway, let's get into this now. Okay, so what we really need to know is what has run and why, or sometimes what hasn't run and why it hasn't run. So my go-to tool, if I'm got the luxury of being able to actually analyze a logon that's happening, as in, oh, this is going to be a bad logon, or this might be a bad logon, let me get some tools in place. Then it's going to be good old sysinternals process monitor, which I know scares some people because of the sheer amount of data that it produces, but the key really is in the filtering, to filter out the what we call noise, the stuff that's not of interest. What's of interest? What's noise? Well, that comes with experience a little bit. But again, this is where I sort of tweak filters and things like that on a very regular basis. So process monitor is a great one if you want to troubleshoot a logon, and let's not mess around. Let's go straight to a demo if I can find the right browser window. So what we'll do is we'll analyze a logon of a Citrix session. Oh, just got there in time. So my home lab running on Dell PowerEdge servers in my garage, keeping it nice and warm. So this will be a Citrix session, and because of what I've done is put other servers in that delivery group into maintenance mode, what I should have here is already a session. Oh no, that actually is my, let's have a look which session this is. This is me preparing for a demo and then forgetting what I've prepared. So that's actually my test user, my non-admin. So I had that ready just in case something went wrong and I couldn't connect and do a live logon. So I've already got a Procmon trace, but let's go and get rid of that and do a live demo. So here's me logged on an admin session to that server 2019 box. Actually there I've got another sysinternals DBG view, which can be useful. Just see debug and driver messages coming out of stuff. I've been doing some other troubleshooting on here for an interesting issue that happens just in my lab. So let's go and find where Procmon's disappeared to. So I had a trace ready to go through, but let's actually clear that, Control X. So that's ready now. I'll start capturing, put that away to the background, launch my session. Oh, my session's expired. Fantastic. That was good timing, wasn't it? I'm sure I clicked continue, but hey ho. So let's launch that one. Probably should have gone back to my session and reset Procmon just to get rid of the noise that's going to be before that logon. But again, just for the sake of demo, because I've got a lot to get through in these 41 minutes and 25 seconds, as we can see from my PowerShell clock. But this is where actually I would suggest you do get hold of that, because it's very useful when you're making notes about what happens visually, because I can say, okay, Mark, oh, okay, so that was at the creating VHD stage. And I can say, oh, I've got a black screen now. So when I come back to troubleshoot, I don't have to have written these down in a book. I've got them there with exact times that I hit the button. I can even edit these afterwards. If I just put placeholders in, I can even put them in the clipboard, or I can save them to a file. So I've got that data, because I tend to find I'd write these things down and forget where I'd written them down. And I don't like writing things down on paper anyway. It seems very last century to me. So that's where that clock can be quite useful, as well as a countdown timer to try and stop me talking too much. So I've now got my desktop for my test user. So if we go back to my remote desktop session on that same server, hit stop, You can see down here at the bottom, I've got 547,000 events. So I can say which one's the important one. Well, what am I troubleshooting at the moment? I'm just demonstrating. I've not got a problem that I'm necessarily need to find. But let's see how we start to analyze what's actually happened during this logon, because this is obviously a very flat trace. We can see various agents, various processes. We can actually change the columns as well if we want. Sometimes it can be quite useful to add things like username and session ID, which unfortunately always end up on the right-hand side when you add these. So we have to drag them over. And depending on how big your screen is, sometimes it takes a couple of drags and drops to get them over. But that can again help you. Is it a session 0? So is it sort of a service, or is it actually in my user session? Well, what is my user session? Well, let's run something as my user. From PowerShell, of course, we don't run CMDs, very legacy. So we'll run a query user or Q user. So we can see that my user, there's the chevron, is session ID 9. So ideally, I'm probably just interested in session 09. But what we can do here from the tools menu is look at the process summary. This can be quite useful. It's a little bit of time. Obviously, I've got over 500,000 events here. This can tell us, particularly if we're looking at maybe a slow logon, we can see a certain amount of data here in terms of what they've been doing in terms of IO and things like that. I don't come here very often. The one I tend to use is the process tree. This is very, very useful, as long as you were running Protmon, obviously, during the logon that you're interested in. As we'll see, and it's this green column here, the lifetime. This is the one we're really interested in, just sort of quickly visually, because this tells us when a process started and stopped. So if it's a solid green bar for the whole trace, it means it was running at the start of the trace and it was still running at the end of the trace. So that will be like services and other sessions. But you can see here we've got some things which are started after. Notice I've got a few running for my Rita Sue test user. And if we come up to the top here, we'll see some stuff for Ivanti Environment Manager, which I happen to be running in this environment. And then we should find the actual standard Windows logon. So here we go, session management and the actual WinLogon process that's spawned to host the logon. And then we can see a number of processes which are spawned within that or spawned by that. So we can see things like WF Shell, which is the WinFrame, what Citrix XenApp or Virtual Desktops and apps was called many years ago. User init, we'll actually come back to that in the presentation, hopefully, so we can see what's going on. And from here, if we need to, we can actually go to the start event. We can filter from here. We can say, well, I'm just interested in that process and what it launches. That can help us get rid of chaff. And if we're looking for specific things like group policy, we can search for gpscript.exe, or we can search for the registry settings. So that we can either search in here for things with a good old Control F, or we can actually filter again, which is either from the menu up here or just Control L. So you can see already there's a lot of filters built in here. Some are all there by default, like the sysinternals doesn't monitor itself, which is great until you have the problem with the sysinternals tools. Here, for instance, I've already excluded other sessions. And even if you haven't got the if you like skill or experience to analyze this yourself, but I would say have a go. The easiest way is if you've got a bad logon and a good logon, try and play spot the difference. It usually is a manual process, but I did find a tool not that long ago. I must dig it out and put a tweet out where it actually allows you to compare logon traces. Obviously, it's quite an art because things like times are different and so on. But compare good with bad. But that, as an EUC consultant, that's what I spend a lot of my time doing: spot the difference. Why does this one work? Why does this one not work? Why did it work last week but doesn't work this week? The other thing, so if you can't analyze it yourself, what you can do is just save the trace, save everything, save it to a file, and send it to someone who can potentially analyze it, support organization for software you're having problems with, that sort of thing. So I have got a separate session on how to use Protmon, but that's not today. So let's go back to the slides. That's a very brief intro to Protmon. There is a tool that's been there for a long time called Windows Performance Analyzer. I've got a whole slide on this, and I was going to have a demo, but then I found all my trace files that I'd previously. Sorry, you're going to say?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I launched the poll. You have 3 minutes, everyone, to just select one option there. Sorry for interrupting.
No problem. So yeah, I had some demos ready. This is a built-in tool to Windows from Microsoft, but my trace files have disappeared. I probably got overzealous because they can get quite big, sort of in the gigs range. So all I can show you for that, unfortunately, is the user interface for analyzing, which looks like that. And she's got various tabs, and you basically load an ETL file. It will give you some nice graphs. Again, I don't use it a lot. I tend to use it when I can't find any other problems with any of my other tools. But be aware that it's there if you need it. Event logs. I know that's a sort of standard Microsoft exam question. Where do you look for problems? But there is a wealth of information in there, believe me. The problem, of course, is finding it, because if you go to standard machine and have a look, how many event logs have you got? Well, in the old days, there was just 4. So that made life fairly easy. Whereas these days, if we go and have a look, not only have we got the standard 4, we've then got a wealth of them down here. And you might not look at these very often, but there is there's a heck of a lot of very useful information contained in there. But after every logon, are you going to go trawling through each event log? This is where the event viewer interface is a bit poor. But as we'll see, I've got a solution for that. So we can go through the event logs. One thing I'd strongly recommend you do, because this will help you be able to troubleshoot logon problems from yesterday or a week ago, if your event logs are big enough, is to enable process creation and termination auditing, so that you get events 4688 and 4689. Says he rather sadly off the top of his head. So that if we go to the security log, so this is part of my standard EUC build, is that you can see here I've got these 4688 and 4689 processes. Always a good idea, particularly on multi-user server OSs, to increase the size of your security log, which you can do through PowerShell, wevtutil.exe, or even manually in here, so that you've got a fairly large size. So I've got 50 meg here. It depends how far you want to go back and how long you between reboot cycles, and whether your event logs are put onto a persistent drive. So that I've got a process creation event here, so we can see what the process was, what the actual command line was, which can be very useful. Obviously, slight security problem here, in that if you've got any sort of program or script that takes plain text usernames and passwords, you're going to be capturing those, although the security event log can only be accessed via admins by default. We can see parent processes. So there's a wealth of information, but again, trying to sort of understand it and unpick it from here can be a real pain. So we go to PowerShell. In fact, let's go and demo that before we go back to that bit. So PowerShell has something called get-win event, which allows us to get events from any specific event log, and with various filters such as date and time. In fact, the one I was going to use is actually a Horizon desktop. I like to mix and match technologies. So here's a Horizon 8 logon that I've previously generated for my test user. And again, we can see the security events there. And there's my administrator command prompt. Command prompt? What am I talking about? Oh my God, I have to go and wash my mouth out after this. It's not a command prompt at all, is it? And it certainly isn't a DOS prompt. So my user, Billy Bob, who's a non-admin, a quick way to tell if someone's an admin, run the filter driver manager control program, because if you're not admin or not elevated, that will give access denied, which actually is also a useful command and something that does feature in this presentation for seeing what filter drivers you've got loaded. If you run it elevated, then you'll see we've got a whole host of filter drivers from various different vendors. These again can cause problems, worst case blue screen, otherwise sort of slowness and interaction issues. You know, or are all these actually legitimate? Do I need them? Should some of them be disabled, etc.? I digress. So what we'll do then is, again, it's on my GitHub repository, so totally free to use. It's one of the 2 scripts that I use very, very frequently. So again, using the search history in PowerShell, Control-R. So as long as you've got a persistent profile, I can even search commands I ran yesterday or last week. So Control-R and just type the first few letters. Why have I gone for 1018? Well, that's the type. If we look at user, well, it says 1020 for query user and no seconds, so that's inaccurate. Well, what's that all about? Well, if you use one of my other scripts, which we'll come back to later, again, this is just looking at LSAS, the local security service. This actually tells us the correct logon time. So you'll find the query user will return something sometimes minutes away from when the logon actually starts. So this is when local security authority actually started processing the logon for Billy Bob, my test user, which was 1018 and 50 seconds. So that's the time I'm going to use. A few seconds back, so I was using 1018, 45. So again, let's go back and search for that. Duration of about 2 minutes. Obviously, I can change that. What that will do is go and search probably about 300 different event logs in that time range for any event that has occurred. I can also tell it just give me errors, but if we're looking for slowness or just clues as to what's going on, sometimes just getting all events can be useful. So let's now put it into a grid view, which is a built-in Windows PowerShell feature. And a grid view allows me to obviously scroll through the information I have, but also to filter and sort. Results of the poll now in. More than I want, that's not surprised. Yeah, I don't care too much about logon. That's interesting, no one's voted for that, but that is something I have raised probably in a slide we won't get to, which is it fast enough? Is it worth me spending a week of my time to shave 2 seconds off when the logon's already only 20 seconds? Probably not. Yeah, so you've got to know when it's just not worth doing. But if your logon's 2 minutes, or I think what annoys users more than anything else is inconsistent logons. So 20 seconds yesterday, 2 minutes today. What's the difference? Yeah, so consistency is key. So this is now showing me all my events. Now again, because I'm not looking for anything, it can be quite difficult to find anything, obviously, because there's nothing to spot, as it were. My logon's quite swift, but this is where I can then cross-reference it back to points of notes. So something I've done quite a lot of is, I don't know if you've suffered it yourselves, but long periods of a black screen during logon. So what I would tend to note in here in my clock is the black screen start and the black screen end, because that's visual. And then try and cross-reference that. Obviously, this is a different logon anyway, so I can't do it. But if that was when the black screen started, I'd go and look at events, perhaps a second before that, to see what's going on. And then again, say in here, we can get rid of the, and it's modal as well, that, by the way. I can't actually put that to the background. And again, that's deliberate. So it's always on top of Windows, so you can always find it. But again, if we use the grid view, we can get rid of some of the columns we don't want. Machine name, user ID, for instance, just to give us a bit more room on screen. I've already got rid of quite a few of the columns that get win event returns, just because they're GUIDs and IDs and things like that we're not interested in. But again, if I want to search for something, let's say specifically that includes my username, perhaps that wasn't, was that a read to sue logon? Well, I didn't mean a read to sue logon. Was that a Billy Bob logon? Got too many test users here. Oh yeah, that was a Billy Bob logon. So again, search for my username. We can see some FS Logic stuff in here. But again, because I'm not troubleshooting anything real here, it's difficult to know what to look for. But the point is, what we've done is bring it in from lots of different event logs, but stitched into a timeline. So that I find that incredibly useful to troubleshooting log-on problems, any sort of problem where you know roughly what time the problem occurred, or slow logons. Again, compare good with bad. Do I get this event on a system where I don't have this problem? Yep, so that's, again, on my GitHub repository, but really just a wrapper for this get-win. Again, notice tab complete, a get-win event on its own, because I haven't told it what to look at, but I can tell it event logs and a certain amount of filtering. But again, if you want to understand how the command works, go and get my PowerShell script and go and understand it. That's how I learned programming back in 1980, when I guess some of you weren't even born, is taking programs my dad would bring home on a Commodore PET in BASIC, play them, then actually read them, the games, and then modify them. So a good way to get started with PowerShell: take a script, understand it, run it, but make sure it's not got anything malicious in it, and then start writing your own. Okay, so I also talked about processes. So remember, we had the process tree and protmon. So if I we saw already we had list sessions, which I've built in because I'm getting querying LSASS to get exact logon times rather than these rather feeble ones that query user returns, which may or may not be related to the actual real logon time. So what I can do is, again, I've put some convenience functions in here. I can say logon of Billy Bob. And what that will do is, using that LSASS information, go and find, in this case, the last logon or most recent logon. Get a few warnings because it's trying to match up start and end processes, and can't find the end process event for some of these for whatever reason, although of course it may not have finished. And then what we see again is another of these grid views. Let me just resize it slightly so we can see we can get the full command line, which is different auditing from process creation. So there's 3 settings: enable process creation auditing, process termination auditing, and command line auditing. But I would suggest you have those on as part of your standard build, because it's so useful for troubleshooting either security audits as well as what we're seeing here. So what are we seeing here? Well, we're seeing number of columns. So this is sorted by the process start time at the moment. So we can see what process is started. So if you remember back to the protmon trace, we had things like winlogon, which spawns MP notify. So we can see that what the process was, what its command line was, which for scripts and things like that can be very useful. What its parent process was. So why was it run? Who ran it? Why is this process running? Yeah, this process has taken 20 seconds and has held up my logon process. Why is it running? Well, let's look at the parent, okay? And then I might be able to cross-reference that to a protmon trace or just documentation for that. Let's actually get rid of the elevated column. So this tool is kind of for logon analysis, but I've also added analysis of the executables that are running. So this can help you spot stuff which perhaps shouldn't be running. And if you know the Avanti application control product, which uses a mechanism called trusted ownership, I put the owners of X's in here. If something is being run and it's owned by a user, it's like, is that right? So it might be something that installs into their profile, like GoToEating or the lovely WebEx, or it might be something you don't want them to run. So this is very VMware heavy logon, simply because this is Horizon, formerly known as Horizon View. But again, useful for troubleshooting. So we can look for long running processes. Now with logon, some long running processes might be holding up logon, others might be running in the background, so you don't know whether they're effectively synchronous or asynchronous. But again, just compare with a good logon. So with a good logon, if whatever this was, which here we can see takes 50 seconds, if that takes 5 seconds in a good logon and there's a 45-second delay, that could be your smoking gun. Yeah. So this isn't going to give you the answer. It's not going to spit out and go, yep, your problem's here, but it can sort of allow you the area to focus in on. And again, compare and contrast this logon, which is fast and the session works, doesn't run this process at all. Okay, let's look at the parent. Let's try and figure out, what runs it. So you get a wealth of information there. And so the beauty of that compared with Protmon, because you don't get as much details with Protmon there, is that I could run that for a logon 2 days ago if my security event log's still intact. Good old GP result, what group policies are running. We'll come back later, if we have time, of course, to see how we can tell what's running slowly in group policies. Don't forget, of course, there are scheduled tasks. Server 2012 running Xbox scheduled tasks at logon. Yeah, thanks, Microsoft. So check what are there, update programs and so on. Again, just for optimizing your logon, do you need that scheduled task running? And good old logon scripts. What can I say about those? People writing scripts, people hacking scripts, adding stuff that somebody wrote 10 years ago, just adding more and more to. The problem obviously with scripts is they generally run sequentially. So you add more code in, you're going to make it run slower. Half the time is, where's this script actually come from? Local policy, group policy, is it hooked into something else? Trying to figure them all out. But again, that's where the Protmon trace or the security event log trace can really help you figure out what has caused something to run. And then there's device drivers. So I briefly touched this with that FLTMC sort of demonstration, which I tend to use more for determining if I'm an admin or not. But the low level stuff, file system filter drivers, services, those sorts of things can have hooks, WinLogon notifiers, etc. I've had to use a lot of those, FS Logics, etc. Citrix UPM. So we need to see what they're doing as well. So a lot of stuff that can go on, and a lot of stuff, of course, that can go wrong. Although usually it's just one thing that goes wrong, and it's trying to find out which it is. So already done a demo on Protmon, so I'll go through this quickly. If you've got a single user OS, so let's say you've got Windows 10, and the problem occurs on first boot, then what you don't want to do is have to log on as your admin. So that links to a brief tweet that tells you how you can do it with remote PowerShell to actually run Protmon without a user interface. Get it running, do your log on, and then terminate the trace so that it can then be analyzed on another system. So effectively, we're using Protmon lights out. There are a number of other ways you can do that as well. It's one of those border on hacking, so I definitely want to demonstrate those. Process tree demonstrated, and the key is the filtering. What to filter in, what to filter out. Some things are obvious, like, well, if I've got other users on, I'll filter out their sessions. Unless I'm looking at handle leak, then I'm going to filter out things like closing of registry keys, closing of files. Some of the more esoteric ones come with experience and perhaps with me with my developer background. But again, this is where I share that knowledge through Twitter and blogs and so on. But the key with the Protmon, of course, is you have to know that you want to be able to put that monitoring in place. So if somebody says, oh, my logon yesterday was really slow, unless you've got your time machine working, you're not going to be able to pop back and get Protmon in there. But if you've got the persistent event logs and the security auditing enabled, then that will give you that information. And the get process duration script on GitHub will actually enable all that auditing for you as well with a particular command line. I can't remember what it is, but again, there's full built-in help. So event logs, did this last night. 495 event logs on my Win 10 laptop. Do you fancy looking through all those manually through Event Viewer? Well, if you do, yeah, okay. Perhaps you should get out more, but a bit difficult in these times. So obviously search over the logon period, and we saw that's where I can use my script. What does interesting mean? Well, that's tricky. Sometimes we can look for errors, or if it's a particular component, we can look for that particular event log or those messages, look at that particular time that the black screen started or the black screen finished. If the black screen finished as per our time recording at a specific time, then we'll look at events around that period. We'll also look at process stops or process starts around that time as well. When I say around that time, within a second or so, because again, the black screen, your timing of it may not be to the millionth of a second. Again, a link to the script that I showed you there for the event log aggregator. It's got a number of filtering options we can do, and then we can, with that as well, we can also put in time since boot and things like that. So we can see relative to boot, relative to logon, how long things took. Again, linked to that other script. If I'm troubleshooting something, I'll use probably both of those scripts. And I know a lot of other people out there in the community who know about them do as well. I'm going to mention the control up logon analysis script. Yes, I do some work for control up, but I'm freelance, so I don't work for them permanently. But I mentioned this really, because I'm responsible for it now. I didn't write the original version, but for my sins, I add new features to it. But the point is, it's a very useful script. Why? Well, first of all, you don't need to have control up to run it, and I'll demonstrate that in a moment. In fact, I'll demonstrate that now because that can take a few seconds to run. If I can remember which of my demo environments I was going to do it on. Find that one, bring it over here. Oh, yeah, and quit my, because that's something else as well. If you need to, select a few of these, and if you click OK, it'll put those details into the clipboard, so you can paste them into Notepad for further investigation or your reports or whatever. Right, so let's clear the screen. And again, using Control R, I've searched for this for my user, so I'm going to actually bring it off my client map drive. But again, that's available for that script is available for download from the Control Up script library. If you go to controlup.com, what that will do is look at various event logs. So it very much needs the process creation and termination, auditing, and the command lines, and then it'll look at various other events. It normally fits on a screen, but I've got quite large fonts here to help people see and to help me see as well. I'm not getting any younger. So we can see some details about the logon. So this is a view. It works both with Citrix and with Horizon, and just with straight RDP, MSTSC logons as well. But it will detect the type of logon and pull out things specific to that particular technology. So over here, if we can see, it's actually picked out the broker that I use, so the connection server. The display protocol tells us overall what time the logon started. Yeah, that's quite a long logon. So we might need to go and have a look at what's slow in there. We break it down into two phases, both for Citrix and for Horizon. So for Citrix, we can actually time it from the moment somebody clicks on an icon in Storefront to when they actually get their desktop session. Not just the Windows piece, but the whole end-to-end Citrix piece using some WMI stuff we found. So we see the Horizon phase, 3.5 seconds. Yeah, not too bad. Then we can see the actual Windows phase. So what's actually happened on this machine. So we can see the source. So you can see we've got things in here for the likes of FSLogix profiles. 62 seconds to load my FSLogix profile. Something amiss here. And there was a 3-second gap, as in it was 3 seconds from when the previous stage ended to when this one started. So why was that? Again, that's something I'd go and look at the event logs for to see what was going on in that period. So that's something of concern. But again, is that always the case? Or is this just an unlucky logon? So again, compare and contrast, spot the difference, as I call it. We've got VMware app volumes in here, their application layering solution. Although, as we can see down here, there was a problem with it, so it didn't actually do anything. And actually, in the Control Up library, which you can run standalone outside a Control Up product, there's a script which get more detail and try and figure out what's wrong. Something else we can see that's quite slow down here is loading of the good old AppX package, the UWP things, which Microsoft insist on doing, particularly more with Windows 10, good old active setup. So we can see the whole duration was 127 seconds. So that gives us information telling us where we should start to look to troubleshoot this. Tells us about group policy, log on scheduled tasks. So is there anything in there which should be disabled? Those will run async. So an Edge update. Well, this is actually a Horizon Gold image. So guess what? I forgot to disable that update. So it's running, but it might not delay logon, but it's taking resource. Yeah. We've got the VMware Dynamic Environment Management in here. So we can now pick that up without needing that logging enabled. And we even look at group policy client-side extensions, the CSE stuff. So this is a recent addition to the script. It was a separate script previously, but I was asked to bring it all in. So this actually now shows us what were the slow group policies. So we can see actually the DEM, the dynamic environment management, again was the slowest, although the printing took 5.5 seconds as well. So we can see both what the client-side extension was and the GPOs, which were slow. Yeah. So I happen to call my GPO printers, but my GPO might be called something completely different. But then I know from what actual CSEs themselves were used, so these are the extensions installed on the machine, that the printer mappings or whatever it was doing in that printer's GPO was slow. So again, I can go and look at these. And if you're interested in sort of optimizing GPOs, my CTP colleague, James Rankin, has done some great articles and videos on those. Again, I mention him later in the slide deck in the references. So that's the control up logon analysis script. I say you can just go and grab that and download it from the website and run it. All it needs, it does take a large number of arguments, but if you're just using it manually, you just domain/username of the user that you're analyzing on, and you've got to be on the system that they're analyzing. You can't do it remotely. So a link to where we can download it from, prerequisites, but again, the script itself can actually enable those prerequisites if you want, although they're probably best set through group policy. Sorry, I just need a slurp of tea. Thank you, sorry, excuse me, but green tea, very healthy. How we use it parameter-wise, all the interesting stuff and other bits. Yeah, in fact, I haven't got that in this environment because I've got a long history with AppSense and Avanti. We also can time their various bits to see if there's a slowness in there as well. So really quite a useful go-to tool to give you clues as to what's running slow. Yeah, Windows Performance Analyzer. There was going to be a demo, but I mean, I've only got 8 minutes left anyway. And I lost all my traces. Not so smart. Can be useful. I use it a couple of times a year, I would say, to be honest. Most of the time I use those scripts and prop them on, and that's enough to find where the problem is. Come on. So other things we can look at. For those of you old enough to remember back to sort of 2003 days, Windows XP, there was something called userenv debug level, which we could set, which gave us a huge amount of logon information. Microsoft, in their wisdom, removed it. So we can't use it on later OSs, unfortunately. There's something vaguely similar, GPSVC debug level, but that's only for group policy, but that can give you some quite useful information and timings in logs. This is a much overlooked log file. Let me just go and briefly get one from my local machine. Don't bother using Explore or anything like that. Again, I just sit in command prompts all day. Can't type. Too many log files. There we go. And we can see, so if something is failing to install or a printer's failing to install, this is your go-to log file. And again, this has timing, so it's taking a long time to install something. You can see when our session started, and we can see as well as it's got away because obviously my laptop's obviously persistent, but it will tell you where it's got drivers from, where it's looked, why it's failed. It's a fantastically useful log file, either for why things didn't work or why things were slow. What's running at logon that necessarily shouldn't be. I always do this after I've got any build ready for a customer. Let's go and see what auto runs stuff that things are put in, like updaters or stuff and things you run at logon. The less you run at logon, the faster it will be, the less resources you've got. So hopefully the more scalable things will be as well. So take out the things you don't need. VMware tools for users. If you're using Citrix PVS, the PVS tray utility, users don't need to see that. Slim it down as much as you possibly can. Yeah, what's in the base and default profile? In the old days, we used to use mandatory profiles, and you'd find some stuff in there, either auto runs or caching of stuff. So make sure any profiles you're using to build on top of are clean. Look for log files, of course, a plethora of log files, whether they're enabled by default or not. You have to check with that particular vendor, as well as event logs as well. Some are ETL traces. They can be useful. Good old antivirus. Some people are still soldier on with their old McAfee's, etc. Others are now going sort of the Windows Defender route / family, because it is, it's good enough now to use, but it's a lot of the time it's exclusion. So with low-level software, it's making sure that low-level software such as Avanti isn't hooking into antivirus, and antivirus isn't hooking into those, but making sure, of course, that you don't dilute your antivirus that much that it's not actually doing anything useful. I've seen people exclude it from the user's local profile. It's like, what? Might as well just turn it off. What are we doing for the profile? If we're using roaming profiles, is it taking a long time to load that profile? People still do use roaming or Roman, as I make a very poor joke about. All my jokes are poor, actually. Sorry, I do appreciate it. This is where I hate having a virtual audience, because I can hear you all groaning. Not. So how are we doing that profile persistence? And is that the slow bit? Are our profiles too big? Even with FS Logics, and you're mounting of VHDs and stuff, and although you're not copying a vast amount of data, or potentially vast amount of data, log off and log on, you still just moving the problem somewhere else. That a profile bloat and too much information. Although there, it's probably just going to eat storage space rather than consume logon cycles. So what am I persisting? How am I persisting it? And am I persisting the right volume? The app setup value in the WinLogon reg key, HK local machine software, Microsoft Windows NT current version. WinLogon, we all know registry keys off the top of their head, don't we? That used to be a question I'd give people at interview. What's your favorite registry key? Not necessarily because I was expecting people to quote me registry keys, but a few people did. But if they said, I don't really go into registry much, it scares me. It's like, well, this job's not for you because we virtualized the registry, and so we look at that value just to see what else has been put in. Third-party products tend to put stuff in there. Microsoft's rather poor attempt at sort of logon scripts for multi-user via userlogon.cmd sits in there. So that's something I usually strip out. Again, only takes a few logon cycles or CPU cycles at logon, but again, just simplifies it. Oh, another poll just come in, folks. I was going to make a joke about Poland, but I won't because I haven't got the time. Good old app in it. Oh, someone's laughing out loud. Oh, finally, some response from my audience. Oh, is there only you left? The horrible thing that is AppInit DLLs, if you've ever had to look at that, that's how a lot of software used to inject their DLLs. So Avanti used to do it, security software do it, Citrix do it. By getting their DLLs into every process, to make sure they can control Word and things like that with various things. That's a horrible, horrible registry value because it uses spaces as delimiters. What problem's that? Well, program files, that's got a space in it. 8.3 file. It's just horrible. But again, it's another way of adding DLLs and another way that things can slow down. Not naming names, but I've seen the Lakeside hooks cause problems when you've got that software installed that slow down processes, sometimes even crash them. So another thing to do is to check what third-party DLLs are loaded into your processes. Guess what? We can do it through PowerShell, but you can also do it through Process Explorer. I haven't got time for this demo now, but if you run up Process Explorer, pick on a process, do a Control-D, which turns on DLL view in the lower pane, you'll see what DLLs are loaded, sort that on the vendor. Most will probably be Microsoft or the vendor of the software. But if you've got third parties, particularly that you don't recognize, then it's like, who are these? Why are they injecting into all my processes? Could be malware, because it's quite an easy attack vector, the AppInit DLLs. I've seen malware do that in the past. Although there is a registry value to say all DLLs must be signed before they're loaded. Of course, the slowness might not be due to anything in the machine itself. Your hypervisor environment, your Nutanix or your VMware or your Zen server. Sorry, I didn't snigger then. or Hyper-V might be overloaded, or you might have some problems with storage, or not enough CPUs, run out of memory, overcommitted, etc. So make sure that, and it's very difficult to tell that from within the VM. If you get perfmon counters up, they can only tell you a certain amount of the story because they're only being fed a certain amount of resource from the hypervisor. So make sure your hypervisor isn't causing the slowness.
Problems with the hypervisor?
Ooh, an ethereal voice. Yeah, just watch out again for. I've seen this. The worst logon I've ever troubleshot for a customer was an organization, I think again in Sweden, and their logons were 45 for 5 minutes. I kid you not. Oh, and look, my countdown timer has expired as well. And so I have a message pop up when my counter expires, and then it resets to 45 seconds. But what was the cause of that 45-minute, some up to 45-minute logon? It was because these were persistent Citrix servers. I think it was XenApp 6.5, but again, the version of XenApp didn't really matter. Because they were persistent, they had this huge GPP cache. And the group policy client, which obviously processes logons, was spending most of its time processing that cache because it had got cached entries for literally the thousands of users who at some point over the years that server been built were using that server.
Yeah, so I mean, Guy, I've seen similar stuff there's a bank in Switzerland when I used to live in Switzerland. I'm not naming which one, but they had logon times 20, 25 minutes. And they just...
I've seen 2 hours logon.
2 hours? Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know what the cause of that was?
Yeah. The cause which I usually see at most of the customers I worked with in the past, it's messed up Active Directory sites and services, subnets which are not added
Oh, yeah.
sites and services. And I also seen and found out with another tool, a customer, which is again a bank headquartered in Switzerland, which had about 1,700 of those messed up subnets. So imagine how many VDI machines. So they had VDI machines in Singapore logging onto Active Directory domain controllers in Brazil or Bahamas or Panama. Yeah.
I wonder if it's the same bank, Vic.
Wink, wink.
I mean, I rarely go to a large customer who hasn't got some sort of AD problems, replication or otherwise.
And the one with 2 hours was actually my former employer, which was an oil and gas company. We found out, and unfortunately back then it was 2010, 2011. So the head of IT infrastructure was logging into his laptop in the morning, and he couldn't use the laptop for about 2 hours. This was the maximum amount of time, because we found out with a fluky device, that's a port monitor.
Network monitor, yeah.
Yeah, that's a very expensive tool. We found out that his computer was logging into some domain controller in Yemen. And they had they did not have NPLS linked with them. Yemen. It was all VSAT. So imagine on a ton of traffic going through VSAT's link. 7,000 up to 7,000 milliseconds delays. So really awful. I will end the last poll, and I will share the results with you. So apparently it's nice. I would have preferred 53% to be lower than 20 seconds, but I think 30 seconds would be an acceptable average for the enterprise customer or the enterprise user.
I've put up my last slide, which is parting thoughts, and I mentioned this earlier, which is I think it's the consistency more than anything else. Even if a user has a 5-minute logon, if they know they're always going to have a 5-minute logon, they can work around that by coming in, logging on, then going there, getting their cup of tea, cup of coffee. But it's when it's 5 minutes one day and 20 seconds the next, and everything works. It can be 20 seconds. Why isn't it always 20 seconds? So I think it's the consistency more than the absolute time.
And this is a personal opinion that I think it does matter more for applications, for published applications, to have a lower logon than actually desktops, because
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously there are Citrix features there to sort of get things warming up ready as well. But yeah, people tend to forget with a published app, as long as they're running off the same server, the first published app is going to do a logon. And worst case, if you launch another published app and it's not on that server for whatever reasons, oh, guess what? I've got another logon. Okay, well, what I'll do there, I will share these slides in some way or form, because hopefully there'll be a good reference deck. But I'll say that hints and tips on this sort of stuff on my blog, my Twitter feed. So hope that's been useful for people.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Guy.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Traian liked a lot your session. He mentioned in a private IM that he liked this session the most from you. He also attended the other event, so he saw your session with, what was it back then, the processes and PowerShell for newbies. And yeah, he likes you very much. Now you're
thank you.
You got a new fan.
Yeah, well, this is it. I learn stuff and I try and help other people. I mean, if other people can learn from what I do, then yeah, I'm all for it.
Okay, thank you very much for your attendance and for accepting this role to be a presenter again, Guy. We do appreciate all your work and your output to the Citrix and the other communities as well. And we do like that you do great jobs.
No, thank you. No, I love presenting, and like I say, I love sharing my knowledge. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, folks.
Thank you very much. We'll have a very short break, 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. And then we will continue with our last session, which is my session around app layering for rookies. So 5 minutes, gentlemen.
And somehow the break is over.
Did it start?
No,
Oh, okay.
it's just delayed.
Okay.
We have people that want to try app layering. Nice.
I didn't have the option. I don't care. So.
It was on purpose. Okay.
Yeah, I thought you should disable me as a speaker always.
Yeah, well, what I can say is that we like when you say something, but most of the time,
You don't.
no, yeah, we don't. Hey everyone. Let's see who else joined. Yep. So we have a poll. So we have 50% of people which played at least once with app layering, and 30% actually have it in production. So 20% would like to play with app layering. Good, interesting figures. One of the reasons why I choose to present again to have a session about app layering is because this is one of the newest acquisitions from Citrix. I remember when I was playing like 6 years ago, I think. Hey.
Yeah, I'm also in a meeting at the same time. What's up?
Okay, I think that was.
That's Mircea.
I think you're in the wrong meeting, Mircea.
I think he unmuted himself. He joined with the same headphone, and he unmuted himself so he could join that and talk. Anyhow, this is a technology which was acquired recently by Citrix. I remember when I was playing with Unidesk about 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago, with my previous employer. I considered a feasible product to work in an enterprise environment. It was great, and I remember joking a bit on Twitter and tagging Citrix that they need to acquire Unidesk, and that happened after a couple of years. And it was awesome. It was awesome that Unidesk was rebranded as app layering and was brought into all families of products. I won't call them products, but licensing. Yeah, licensing features, and that brought a lot of joy for all customers, because there were some which either didn't have platinum features, others which had, so everyone would get app layering. Let me present now my screen. I do have a presentation. I do have also a demo, which I okay. I do hope you can see my screen. Anyone? Some feedback?
We can see it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So app layering. What is app layering? How does it work, and how does it help me? Ports and protocols demo, and some keynotes. So app layering, if you would imagine a deck of cards you could associate those layers with a deck of cards, where a layer would be one card, and the whole hand that you would get or you would create would be an image. So each card a layer, and the hand would be the whole image or a set of layers. We have different layers, we have or different sets of layers, and different versions in each layer. You can mix them in an infinite possibility. You can create stacks, you can change the order, although that's pretty defined order by default. You can actually change the order. We'll talk more about this. What I can say is that this is a feasible product for all companies. It's up to you basically to see if you can, if you like working with app layering, if you consider it a contender for any kind of activities that you already have. You might like it, you might not like it. The idea is that you need to play with it to see if it's feasible or not for your work. It may actually help you in the future by investing some time in preparing everything you have right now. It might take some more time actually if you have automated tasks or semi-automated tasks to manage your image. What I learned is that there's no silver bullet with app layering. You either like it or you don't like it. If you don't like it, you will never implement it. There are a couple of things which, let's say, app layering comes with some advantages. First of all, it's free. It was not free when it was Unidesk based, because you have to pay that company some cash. Now it's included in your existing licensing, Citrix licensing, so you could just use it. We've seen customers using them for small environments, and when I'm talking about small, I'm talking about, let's say, smaller than 100, 500 seats, so 500 users. But we've seen it also implemented at large customers, 35, 50,000 seats. So a lot of complexity being managed with app layering. There are ways you can work with app layerings. As I mentioned, it's up to you how you manage this. What's not included in app layering, there's no isolation. So if you need to have isolation, something like AppV or ThinApp has, you need to work in that way. You can definitely incorporate an AppV package or a ThinApp package in a layer. That adds a bit of complexity. You can do it though. So the overall idea is that you need to play with it, and imagination is the limit, basically. So as I mentioned, there are different layers, different components in app layering. You have the operating system layer, which is the base layer. It's being created from a master image or golden image or vanilla image, however you want to name it. That's usually one image, and this is the advantage of app layering. It uses only one image. It simplifies image management as much as possible, and most of the customers I worked with in large or very large customers, let's call them more than 10,000 seats, implemented app layering just to simplify image management, because they basically had more than one image. I worked with customers which had like 50 or 100 images. And I'm not joking, you need an army of people or some automated, semi-automated tasks in order to update those images every month. So you have also the platform layer where you usually install hypervisor tools or the VDA agent in our case. Then you have application layers and elastic layers. There was something like user layers. I'm not sure if those are deprecated right now, but the application layers in general can be set up as elastic layers. Elastic layer is a layer which would elastically attach on user logon when the user doesn't have that application which is contained in that specific layer installed on the image or compiled in the image. So imagine you'd have a user with which would require Notepad, or a group in Active Directory which would require Notepad++ developer group. You would just add an assignment to that layer for that specific group. So everyone would get it on Logon, which is great. The bad thing is that, or the bad part is that you can't actually use elastic layers for all kinds of layers. They are mostly using or mostly adapted for light applications. You can't attach complicated low level kernel mode drivers and applications which include all these components which are connecting at low level to kernel or to the base operating system. So applications, yeah, in general, and they're working fine. I haven't seen though too many customers which are using app layers and elastic layers. Where I've seen them being in use, they were happy. So that's one of the things that I have observed on the field. App layering is something which, as I mentioned, it's providing a way to compile images out of multiple layers containing different settings, applications, or operating patch levels even. The advantage of having or using app layers in a case, for example, that I can give you, we had bad months when Microsoft just released the patch. Everyone said, well, we'll need to patch all of our devices with this patch. The advantage that comes with app layering is that you can actually push the updated or patched layer, operating system layer, into production. You can update all machines, and then you can revert back in case you find an issue with that specific image, old desktops using it, and you can just go back another layer version basically. So this is one advantage. The disadvantage is that this operation takes some time, so it's not on the fly, but still you can prepare for that, and you can reduce the time. Overall, it reduces the cost of maintaining the VDI images because you have just one image, or you can limit the number of images that you use in an environment. It adds a bit of cost, and I will talk a bit more on that. When you add more layers each month or each day, basically, if you create more layers, each layer would take some storage. So basically, it uses some storage, and preferably that would be expensive storage because you would need some fast storage for app layering in order to work faster. It offers Citrix admins to be more efficient, agile, and be able to update the right components or roll back on time, as I mentioned. And it also simplifies the operating system, the applications as individual entities, and allow you to compose and manage multiple images and layers as required. I have here a slide which presents all the ports and protocols. From protocol perspective, we're talking only about TCP, no UDP, no other ports, which is extremely good because we're talking about simplification. And we also have some ports which are highlighted in red. These are the ports which I would say in a pure Citrix environment where you're using the Citrix hypervisor or Xen server would be used. So it's extremely simple to configure this. If you would take in consideration that you have everything from Citrix, you don't have firewalls in between different other components, everything resides in the same VLAN. It's extremely simple to configure and manage. So again, it supports a lot of hypervisors, even Hyper-V, Nutanix, and it also has a component which is called bit server. I was not aware of this because I'm not working with app layering for a while. I'm not actually doing operations for some time, but I played with it, so I know it's being used only for Hyper-V, because in the past you basically had in Hyper-V you needed to have storage locally attached to the Hyper-V to the hypervisor, and app layering was using that storage. So it was a bit messy to manage the Hyper-V environment in general. So now you need to have a server, way more simplified, because you just add a storage to that server, and app layering is using that bit server from version 19.05, if I'm not wrong. It uses this server to copy files to and from the app layering appliance. It allows progress reporting during copy operations as percentage complete rather than elapsed time, how it was in the future. So great things. And now a demo. Let me see if I can find that demo. Any questions until now? Anyone? Okay.
Does Homer have a 6 instead of his belly?
A what?
A 6, the digit.
I think
Yeah,
that's
that's what I thought when I saw it as well, actually.
Yeah, no, there was no question, so I said I should ask something.
Yeah.
Yeah, even the mouth. I don't know. Seems the mouth and the belly button is our 6.
If he kisses his own belly button, it's a 69, in fact.
And an M above his ear.
Okay, so I do have, it's not starting. Why it's not starting? Let me start VLC. So I had to record my presentation, my demo, because—
Hey guys, am I audible now?
Yes.
Ah, sorry. Yeah. So about earlier, if I still may have a brief word for a minute or two. Don't have any questions, but I do have something to fill in. So you said that you can't do or cannot use the application layers for any applications that would require changes to the kernel, or for example, drivers.
No, you can, but you can't use them as elastic layers.
Oh, all right.
Because you need to basically restart the operating system. So that's the only way you can do it.
That's correct. I thought you were saying you can't use application layers at all. So yeah, you can, but you can actually script it, and that's the way to do it. You can script it to do it during the image compilation.
Yeah, I did not mention everything. Thank you. I have my app layering here. This is my lab. This is the my app layering ELM.
Victor, you're still
You
showing
can only
Homer.
still see Homer.
Say again, please.
You're still showing Homer.
My bad. Because I shared that presentation.
Needs to
New
be
share.
technical.
Yeah, I will share the whole screen now. Good. So this is my lab. This is the vCenter console. I'm using vCenter and vSphere because I got used to it. I'm also a member of the vMug user group, so I do use this lab to do some presentations for them as well. So this is my ELM. I won't spend time on this. I'm using Edge Chromium to access the Citrix layering management console, so the ELM console. I have different layers here. I have this operating system layer, Windows 10. You can use Windows 10. You can use Windows 7, and also the operating systems based on Windows Server. So they still offer support for old versions of the operating system. I do have a platform layer, and if you click or double click any kind of layers, you have a lot of information here that you can digest. You have logs around things that happen in that layer or were captured. I have my own naming convention, which I use, and I suggest using a naming convention for layers and for the layers version information, because it helps you a lot. You may have layers which are built in this specific day, but also you can do, I don't know, additional versions for that layer because it happens to work more time on a layer, more complexity with that specific application or settings. So you create multiple versions in that day. This is my suggestion: add a version to the date. It will help you tremendously. As I mentioned, in the platform layer, you can add different core applications or platforms, I'd say. And we're talking about hypervisor tools like the VMware tools, CentOOls. You can also, or you should add also the Citrix VDA. And in app layers, you can have different layers. This is a new ELM which I built last evening when I realized that my ELM, which had a lot of information in it, was not working anymore. I couldn't do anything, so I just built. Thank you, Mircea. And you can have a lot of layers which you can just export and import. I haven't done that because I just didn't have the time to prepare this in a short time. So I did prepare a Notepad++ app layer. I can actually create one right now. I'm not sure how much time we will have for this demo, if I will finish in time. So what I did is I recorded the whole process, and I can talk through it. I did strip down the parts which took time. I did accelerated 3x or 5 times some parts of it just to complete. So what I'm doing here is I don't have any layers. I right click, create layer. I will create this Notepad++, and I'm describing the layer description here, the version number, And yep, here I select the operating system layer. Hopefully I can go back a bit. I have different operating system versions, and I can actually mix them and create different versions of my layer with the different versions of the operating system layer. I would want to create a version or I could mix up this Notepad++ layer with a different version of the operating system because I might have different patches inside to it. So just one reason why you would want to use different layers. My personal recommendation is not to have too many layers in for each, not too many versions for your applications or platform or operating system layers, because it creates a lot of complexity in managing the storage. The layers will be kept in the ELM VM storage, so virtual disk, so that disk will grow tremendously with time. So more complexity in managing that. Going really fast with this, you can select different prerequisite layers. You can, I don't have any for the moment. You can select different connectors. You can export this layer to either a network file share or different hypervisors. So since I have only vSphere here, that's what I'm selecting. But for example, if you have for Nutanix, you can select the Nutanix and you can export the disk layer into the Nutanix cluster, so you can use it there. That's the advantage. You can mix with different platform layers. I'm not doing this right now. And you can even select a logo for this layer. So I have the Notepad++. Some information here in the bottom pane. You can maximize it. You can double click the task, and you can see the status. Here, app layering connects to the vCenter SDK and performs some tasks. Right now, it's cloning, creating a VM based on the operating system layer that's and the image which I created. And right now it's using the API 2, and this is the part where I accelerated everything. It's creating this this layer and this machine. When this task will be ready, I will be able to connect to the machine, to the VM, which was will be created as a snapshot machine in order to install the actual application, so we can capture the modifications. So you would get a before and after snapshot, a compare process, and then you can app layering takes the differences and creates a layer with that. So I went to the Notepad++ website, downloaded the application. You might actually, so my recommendation is not to do too many operations in that image, because you would have a lot of cleaning up to do. So use a network share. I installed Notepad++. It's not here, but it is installed. I'm not sure what happened during the installation. So personal recommendation here from my experience, start the application, use it, do some testing. What I'm doing here is to install, I'm installing the compare plugin and check if compare is installed. Yes, it's installed. I will close the application. And what's required for you to do in this process before closing, finalizing the app layer, is to ensure that you've done the application and operating system configuration and personalization to that's required for that application to work, because all the modifications will be kept and will be kept in the layer, captured and used in the future layer. I'm using a tool from a community tool which is called Base Image Script Framework. This helps the Citrix administrators using app layering a lot. I've been promoting this for Unidesk and also for app layering since 5 years, 6 years ago. People were using CCleaner, Crap Cleaner, sorry, for tasks like this. I used that and the BISF because it just strips down and automates a lot of tasks which you normally would do with either manually or with some scripts, or I don't know, or with other tools. The good or the advantage of using this is that it's maintained by the community. You can suggest different features and different, I don't know, issues to be fixed. And it's working fine. A lot of people I know, this is, by the way, a really old version, so it's version 1912. I'm not sure which is the latest version, but a lot of improvements have come since then. This should work without any issues. I've realized that there was a small bug here. So this is trying to write some logs in C Windows Logs this folder. That folder does not exist. I will create it now, but it has a backup scenario, so we can use the folder which I configured in a GPO called BISFlogs. So yes, you can manually configure or automate even this, because it has a local GPO that you can use to configure different tasks. So I configured my BISF installation to perform a lot of tasks which, yeah, normally are prompting the admin for interaction. So really quickly, I'm accelerating here. I have a folder which I created in my operating system layer, where I've added the BISF, Crap Cleaner, Citrix Optimizer, and that's one thing which I'm suggesting again to use to optimize your images. It offers a higher density, user density for Citrix virtual apps and desktops as well. I'm using also some other tools which might or might not be required in a virtual environment, but like Allruns, Process Explorer, Procmon. So the tools which also Guy used to mention in his session. These might come in handy at a certain time in future. They don't eat too much time, and because most of storages have now deduplication and compression, it's basically nothing in regards to storage. And the good thing is that if you use Crap Cleaner, Citrix Optimizer, you can. So this is aware of those tools, and you can configure different activities or tasks to use these tools from these folders. And really quickly going through this, this has not finished yet, but it will. And when it will finish, by the way, you can configure before finishing this layer, you can run via this different tasks, including .NET engine optimizations. You can configure TCP/IP offloading, different optimizations which are required for the network stack, which are you can disable IPv6, for example. And you can do a lot of stuff which are normally being done in the operating system layer, but I'm doing that in every layer because I'm using the same snapshot of this, so it just doesn't matter. But you need to take care if that application requires some different settings or optimizations in the stacks. You need to go back and set up those things. Really quickly, it does a Windows WinSCX optimization. It can also scan for viruses, malware, so it can trigger an antivirus scan. And as you can see, it's running Trap Cleaner, disabling some options here, and yeah, clearing event logs because normally you would not want that. Good. And when it's finishing, you can just shut down the VM and trigger the finalize task in the ELN console. And this is the process, which is using the newly added it was added in version 2019 or 1909, if I'm not wrong. The Citrix compositing engine. It's an API, or it works based on API, and it offers a way faster way to work with app layering. I do hope that they will improve this part even more, because I would consider app layering being not that fast as I would want it. So let me, I forwarded that here. What I'm doing here, showing you the layer. This is how it looks for the moment. So I'm checking this option here that I'm allowing the app layer to be elastically assigned to layered images regardless of the operating system layer. If I'm not wrong, this is not suitable for production because you shouldn't do this, but still it doesn't mean that you can't. You have all sorts of options here, and the most important one I'd say is that, sorry, going back, apologies for this, you can add assignments. When you add assignments, basically you assign a group or a user in Active Directory to have this layer that you created, which is Notepad++, to be assigned on the fly during user logon. So this is something, unfortunately, I can't show you for the moment because of my issues which I faced right now. Yeah, you can. So what I've done here is I created a new image, which will be dumped in my vCenter console. And that's basically a new VM, which I create. And I will be able to see my results. So that's an image which contains the newly created Node++ layer. And I won't, I will close this. Come on, go away. Yep, so let me go back to my, where is it? I'll have it here. Okay, let's start it again. Okay, so this is the image which was created based on that template. The template contains the operating system layer and the Node++ layer. I'm using my admin Vic credentials to connect to this user session. And this is not an elastic layer, so it's just embedded in the image. So I have not Notepad++ here. Again, this is, I have the compare plugin here added. I don't get any prompts in regards to Notepad++. The only icon I have, so no desktop icon, is only the one in the start menu. It does contain, so if I show you, it does contain the operating system layer files and settings. If I go into Windows tools, I do have all these files which I mentioned, and I can show you here which was that? The snap in for local group. Okay, let's see. In computer admin templates, you have the GPO for base image script framework. How this works is you copy the ADMX files into C, Windows, policy definitions. So you have here this is the one. Base image script framework ADMX. If you can copy on installation, during installation, this ADMX here, you would get this options. And I hope everyone knew about this. And you have different settings here for third-party tools, as I mentioned, seeing the state as enabled or disabled means that I configured this this specific setting in GPO, and I'm telling this to use this custom search folder, to use CCleaner, the same for enabling CM trace. This is, if you haven't used CM trace until now, it's a tool which comes from config manager. It's my favorite log viewing tool. And I don't use deltprof. Anyhow, I do use disable IPv6 feature, so that's one thing. You can run or do not run antivirus full scans. So that's my options here. I do use Citrix Optimizer. You can optionally set up different templates, Citrix Optimizer templates, to be run and apply on that setting. I use the standard options. And I just analyze it only. You can do all sorts of activities around personal read disk, which is something which will go away. The PVS target device part, the optimizer, you can set up different write cache, disk drive letters, this format, all sorts of stuff. And you can set up FS Logix features. There are some features which I don't have it here because of the old version I have, but I don't think we're lacking too many. I do hope that in the future we will have somebody presenting some FS Logix neat stuff, because it's extremely welcome, I'd say. FS Logix was acquired by Microsoft, and I do hope more and more environments will shift to FS Logix because it's free now. Yeah, so a lot of things that can be configured here in order for you not to be prompted to pick one of those options when you finalize the layer. So again, what we've learned today is that app layering isn't a must for your environment. You need to play with it. You need to see if it's suitable for your environment. It might not be suitable, but I would say it has some great features. And based on my experience, it's appropriate for environments, for large environments, which are extremely complicated because of multiple images. So this is where it helps a lot. Unfortunately, there's no official SDK, so no automation for you, but it's not impossible. So you might have RPA, you might have, you might automate your clicks, let's say, but we have a community member called Ryan Butler, which created an unofficial SDK. So he reverse engineers different tasks. I might be able to show you some more information about this. This is the GitHub. It's not updated too often. Again, it's volunteer based, but it does a lot of things. These are unsupported by Citrix, so you need to use them with caution. It's well documented. We have even Citrix employees which are working on this. Dan Feller is one of them. He's an architect with Citrix. And it's really great to have something like this. It's not great because it doesn't come from Citrix. So I'd say Citrix should work if they're not working on an official SDK for app layering, because that is something which will help Citrix admins a lot. Yeah, you need to take in consideration if you want to shift to app layering that you'll need more storage to store the ELM and the layers that will grow with time. So each layer will take some gigs, some tens or hundreds of gigabytes. Those will be stored on your classic storage attached to the VM, to the ELM VM. So that's additional storage for you. If you take in consideration that you would not have so many images, maybe it comes in handy. App layering can simplify or complicate your existing processes. If you have right now an automated or semi-automated way to work with image creation or image updates, probably it doesn't have a logic to go with app layering. But as I mentioned, you need to play with it first. It's easy to create the layers. I would say extremely easy. Once you learn the caveats behind it, and there are some rules, I would say, to follow when you create the layers, it's easy to create them, or extremely easy. The bad part is that it's harder to organize and to use layers which are using components or the same components with different versions, because you would need a tool which is called layer priority utility. I will show you this, or I will try to show you this if it's working on my environment. But there's a way to lower or raise the priority in a template, so you can generate an image based on what options you want to have that. Recommendation, again, as I mentioned and showed you, you would want to optimize the layers before finalize. Use Citrix optimizer or any optimizer. I personally use the Citrix optimizer because I think that's the best optimizer for this kind of workloads. And advise use the BIS as well, because you can automate a ton of tasks which are required when you do the seeding. So that was it for today from my side. Thank you very much. And I do hope that I did not take too much of your time. Yeah, that's what I had. Any questions until now about Citrix app layering? Anyone?
With the layer priority tool, I guess I personally I've used it, and it comes with let's say it's a two-edged sword, because once you have a lot of image templates, what you need to know is once you modify the layer priority of a certain application layer, it modifies that priority, of course, of that layer which is applied to all the images. So you might end up, for example, having an application which now doesn't run just because another similar application or another layer is now a higher layer priority than that particular application. So you might fix an issue that you have into one image, into one template, but then again, you might end up creating problems in other images. And probably that's why Citrix doesn't support the layer priority utility. I've basically I've stumbled into that, and that was the response, that they don't support layer priority utility. So it take that with a little bit of salt.
Mm-hmm. Thank
There
you.
is also an option which might be easier. If you end up into issues, you can just and typically you want a higher layer priority for a specific application layer which is now not functioning. When you clone an application layer, it automatically the new clone layer automatically has the highest layer priority, of course, because it's all based on an ID number. And you can use the clone application layer feature to have higher priority layers, but this also duplicates the layers. So that can be an option as well.
Thank you for the comments. Yeah, and I've seen in the chat that you mentioned that Citrix did mention that they're developing an SDK, but it will only work for the cloud version of app layering. Yes, there's a cloud version as well of app layering, which is working for the cloud-based instance. You can't mix them together, unfortunately. The good thing is that yeah, it will come, but based on my experience, not too many customers are right now onboarded in Citrix Cloud. Some will never, or as I heard, will never shift to Citrix Cloud. So yeah, that's one thing which will not work well. Okay, we'll have a really short break. No, we don't have any break. We have a roundtable and closing and prizes. There's one thing around prizes which was not clarified with Katie, which is our help on the organizer side. We don't know what prizes we have. So with your approval, we can actually use the spinning wheel, the Wheel of Fortune, in order to pick up 3 winners, and we'll see, and we'll contact the winners to see after we will decide with Katie which are the prizes. We usually give vouchers, either Amazon or
socks.
Local. Yeah, Bitcoin. We give Bitcoin, right? Not at this price.
Socks, man. Socks.
Socks? Yeah, I'm not sure if we have socks. So we'll have some winners, and we will contact the winners to hand over the prizes. Usually we have some swag coming from the sponsors and some vouchers coming from CUGC. So we'll, I'm not sure which was the Wheel of Names, yeah. And I have some come on. I have some names here, which I will paste.
Yeah, just write Costi Victor, Victor Costi, Costi
Yeah.
Victor.
I totally agree.
Shuffling a bit, and I'm spinning the wheel. Let's see who wins.
Me.
So, do we have Sim online?
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Yay!
You win something. We don't know what. But you win something. You won something. Yay.
Bitcoin. You said that Bitcoin. It was.
No, we don't have
if
Bitcoin. We wanted to put Bitcoin. That's not official at this price.
Yeah, you get something like the 10,000 part of a Bitcoin or something.
Okay, let's have you removed from the list, and we'll spin again.
Don't see myself there.
Okay, we have Traian as well. Yay.
Damn it.
Do we have Traian online now?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes.
Ah, damn it.
Just before.
We can cancel him.
Okay, and we remove Traian. Let's shuffle a bit. Okay, last one.
Yay, the socks.
Is it Kasper?
It is Kasper.
Yay!
Yay!
So, guys, we will contact the winners in private because we will need your email addresses, I guess, to share the prizes. Otherwise, I do want to thank everyone which joined today, and most of you guys which you stayed up until this time. I know everyone has some activities, has their job, their daily activities to cope with during this time, and it was a pleasure having you onboarded into this journey of ours into this user community. I think we had about 20 users, including us from CUGC, local leaders, and also the presenters which attended. And yeah, hopefully we will have more presenters, volunteers from the community itself. Thank you very much. This was all for today. So I give you back 30 minutes back. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good day.
Bye-bye.